All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Sorry, we had a tiny little bit of a technical difficulty with audio, but we should be fine now. So hello to all of our viewers. Thanks so much for tuning into this Lunch and Learn. My name is Liz Eggleston, and I work for Course Report, which is a resource for finding the coding bootcamp that's right for you. So if you haven't looked at Course Report yet, you can use our directory to find schools that fit your needs, and you should also check out our blog for unique features like interviews with students and instructors and founders at boot camps across the world. So today in this Lunch and Learn, we are joined by Emil from Career Foundry. And Emil is a designer, and he's also the CMO of Career Foundry, and he's going to share his journey into UX design and share some tips and tricks on how you can make a career change into tech as well. So we're really excited for that. I want to remind everyone that this will be a sort of question and answer style webinar, so please use the questions tab to send in any questions, or you can tweet at Course Report and we will try to get to all of them. And one other reminder is that we have a pretty sweet discount for all of you who are tuning in, so use code Course Report in the referral section of the application when you apply to Career Foundry, and you'll get 10% off tuition. So I'm also happy to answer any questions about like discounts and scholarships after the webinar. So I will pass it off to Emil, and Emil, just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background and your journey into UX design.
Sure. So hi, everybody. Thanks, Liz, for having me. It's great to be working with Course Report, and we love doing these sessions. So thanks, everyone who's joining and watching as well from home. Appreciate your time. My name is Emil Lamprecht. As Liz mentioned, I'm the CMO at Career Foundry. And that means that my responsibilities range particularly between marketing and product. And as part of that, UX design is a big part of what I do. It always has been. My career actually started not in tech. I started in toys 7 or 8 years ago, designing toys, building them up to launch, and then helping launch them to markets across the world. I then moved into media, both traditional advertising media, but also more on the film side. Worked quite a lot with film festivals and distribution to festivals. Again, creating sort of the process of creating products for a very distinct market and then bringing them to that market. And then went through some period of sort of playing with topics in different industries until I landed in tech about 4 years ago. Realized that in tech, what I was doing had actual names, one title of which being UX design or user experience design, which was sort of a process that I had hashed for myself but hadn't really attached a name to. And then over the past few years, I've really made that a large part of what I do. I mean, obviously I'm a marketer. My position also states that. But the UX course that we designed at Career Foundry was really a large part of what brought me to the company. It was a big opportunity for me to develop something that isn't really available yet, as a course and as an ideal. UX design is still really undefined. I do actually quite a lot of writing and publishing about that, about trying to help define the UX field. Some people really think of UX as something that is inherent to strategy, as a thought process that is not necessarily a separate role, while many others feel that it really is a distinct and separate role that is an individual's responsibility within a company or within a firm or within even a small startup or a website. What's interesting for me is I kind of articulated the introduction to UX best with sort of my own history, and so much that, I started in toys. When we're talking about user experience design, we're not necessarily just talking about a digital technique. We're talking about a basically socioscience technique. We're talking about a study of human nature in reaction to an experience. And that involves a lot of psychology, that involves a lot of marketing knowledge, that involves a lot of understanding of and awareness of you and people, and particularly the people that are the target or that are your market, and being able to go out and find those distinct personalities and their distinct habits, to be able to study them, to create something that's appropriate for them specifically. And that's not necessarily just tech. So when we talk about UX today, certainly how we talk about it at Career Foundry within the context of the course, we cater to careers, and UX design as a career in technology is growing and expanding very rapidly. So of course we're going to talk about it mostly within the technology field, But you should be aware that there is a side to it that is not technological, that doesn't necessarily only incorporate the need to understand computers and technology, but it's really the way this glass is shaped, the way this wine tastes, the way this phone is built, are all elements that require a human reaction to enjoy, and those have to be designed and catered to. UX is just one more way of thinking and approaching that. I think one of the reasons that Liz invited me to do this, and feel free to interrupt me, Liz, if there's questions to start jumping onto.
Sure.
But one of the reasons we wanted to sort of have this session, as we discussed about, when setting up, was really, again, continuing this discussion of definition, specifically of the UX field, because it is very soft. I'd be interested to know, maybe all of you that are listening and feel like writing a comment, how many of you understand sort of what the actual differences are between UX and UI, what the actual differences are between UI and graphical or visual or branding design. These lines are all pretty blurry. They're pretty hard to really put a finger straight on. UX design, for me, is a separate field. It's something that is really a very distinct skill set. So whether or not you incorporate it as part of many things that you do as a professional, or as strictly, purely that, I think you're capable of doing both, and I think it's just important to understand that it is something you have to get good at, stay good at. So if you're going to be multiple things, if you're going to be a UX/UI designer, if that's what you want to become, you have to understand both processes as they are separately as much as they are together. So to that point, Career Foundry, for instance, our course is really a UX course. What we try and teach is the process of what others would call basically product development. You start with saying need to build what the client, what your design build is, and you take that level is to go and sort of formulate that into something that can be tested. And every iteration of that throughout the entirety of not only the course, but in creating a product, developing the UX product, and that includes products that are currently active, not just new products, is trying to formulate a test environment for the goal at hand. So if the goal at hand is to create a project management app that specifically does this best, or maybe it's just a project management app, you don't know what it needs to do best. Maybe it needs to do something distinctly that the rest of the market of project management doesn't. You need to be able to formulate that and structure that into a questionnaire or in some sort of interaction and testing environment with users to have them tell you what you need, to have them define themselves as the potential users of this product, so that you have a clear idea of that profile, who that is, and what they need to accomplish their daily activity through an app like this. And this exchange, this testing environment is sort of consistent throughout the entire development of the product. It's a lot of the process that we focus on.
So Emil, Clay just wrote in and said, this is what I think, UX is about the experience and creating a business solution, and UI is the digital aspect of that solution. Would you agree with that?
That's a very interesting way of putting it. To a large extent, it's true. And it's mostly true because UI, unlike UX, is strictly a digital application. User interface implies, in its definition, whether you look it up in the dictionary or Wikipedia, it implies that it has to do with a digital interface. So a user interface is therefore digital, therefore any sort of design around it is a digital form of design, which, as said before, UX is not necessarily that. So to some extent, yes, I would say that the only thing I would say differently is that the design to a business goal is equal responsibility, because you're basically trying to say, okay, this is everything that the user needs to accomplish this business goal effectively. These are the guidelines. This is the priority of information. This is the structure of how the product should be laid out, / the features that are most important for that to be effective for that user to accomplish that goal. The UI's responsibility is to then say, okay, from this user, from the layout of these goals, how do we use sort of visual elements and responsiveness to a user and their touching the product or interacting with the product to draw them in and through that line of thought or through that storyline very succinctly. So UX sort of lays out the story, if you will, and UI is sort of articulating it, making sure that your eye is drawn to a certain place. It's really sort of taking the user and grabbing them so much than saying, okay, this is the pleasantries of it. This is the pleasantries, but within this confine, we want you to look at this and go here and go there and go there and go there. And they both involve the same sort of research, but go for it.
Just thinking through sort of like the technical skills that are required, I just want to remind everyone that Emil's actually in Berlin right now. So when he says, talking about his wine, I promise he's not like drinking at noon. So when you think about UX design, UX design, what are the sort of like baseline skills that are going into that? Like, do you consider hard business skills being a sort of part of that role? Like, are you interacting a lot with non-technical people and project and like product managers and on a team? And just tell us sort of just about those sort of hard skills that people need to have in order to break into the industry.
If we're talking specifically startups, for any role, it really helps a lot to have a base understanding of all the roles around you, naturally. Large corporate tech, it's not as critical. The process is going to be very succinct and not include as much interaction. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't, it just means it's not necessary. But in a startup environment, everyone sort of has to wear multiple hats. To some extent, all the time, for as long as the startup is still a startup. And that means that the UX role particularly tends to be kind of a liaison. It's a liaison between product people, if there are product people. It's a liaison between them and the developers and the other designers on the team and even the marketers, because part of what the UX process involves is trying to understand what pieces of the communication or what pieces of the articulation and that means that marketers, in a way, as part of their continuing market research and development, to incorporate, it's their responsibility to then incorporate that to how they design the content and refine the content to be perfect for those users. So, even in the course that we teach, content for the product that you're building in the course, not necessarily because you need to be a content expert. We don't expect you to be doing phenomenal marketing copy, but because by going through the exercise of creating the whole breadth of product and having to spend that time and understand how, where, and who, how, where, go, and sound, you kind of gain that full breadth vision. So, yes, it is a liaison dynamic role. There's no simple version of a UX designer, except maybe in the very extreme of being a large corporate context where you're given very specific things to test and very specific things to answer for. That's a little bit different, but for the most part, you're going to be, a cross or a mixed-hatted role to some extent.
Right, and maybe because it's sort of a new and like evolving field, like I feel like you can't, it's not like you can major in UX design, right, like in undergrad. How do you sort of suggest that people best prepare themselves for a career in UX design? Like, I think, if somebody's doing their undergrad right now, like what could they major in potentially? Like psychology or like graphic design, or what are your sort of thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because UX is still so young. I mean, let's look at it in practical terms. The term user experience design was invented in 1998, 99 by the Norman Group, by Mr. Norman specifically, as a ideal for testing and interaction, regardless of product type. And it didn't really become a profession or a succinct skill set until about 2006. Haven't really existed very long. However, UX is, again, it's an adaptation of many different elements of skill. At the moment, it's become an adaptation of design skills or testing skills that are specific to technology, at least for this discussion. That means that there are many fields that at least lead you in the right thinking direction. There are several universities in the United States, also here in Europe, not very many, but a few, who have very intense interaction design courses.
Okay.
It's important to think of, interaction design as a university program means you're studying many different elements of design, but it also, because it has to do with interaction, which inherently is the human touch, the human element, you're dealing with basically a UX thought process, a UX thought development through learning that. Now, there is no university that teaches UX design. There's hardly websites that teach proper UX design. There's, even if you look at many of the free courses that exist across, the MOOC platforms and everything else, very few of them are actually UX design. They're usually some form of mixed UI design with some other testing processes in there. Again, so the lack of definition between the different disciplines. Specifically, and I'll just loop this quickly back, because we are Career Foundry and that's what we built. I'll loop it back to what we did, which is we built this because it didn't exist. A training curriculum to become a UX designer to start before we wrote this course. That however one chooses to go about it, there's lots of opportunities to break new ground, which is actually, as a professional, quite exciting because each person who decides to call themselves a UX designer has the opportunity to contribute to that definition and contribute to what education of the topic should become or should be in the future, which I think is a very important phase we are right now as UX designers. But it's also an interesting opportunity from the standpoint of the academics in the world. The academics who still are working at universities, who are trying to develop curriculums that are helping students grow into new industries, specifically into tech, because it's the largest, fastest growing one in the world. So there's an opportunity there, but there's not a lot available yet. It is very limited, particularly in the academic world. To answer your exact question, there are the interaction design programs. Psychology is certainly a great place to start, whether you want to be a marketer or any sort of research designer. Very great places. Technical visual design programs, ones that really focus on technical design, that's going to teach you a lot. It may not give you the UX process, but it's going to teach you how to research. It's going to teach you how to look at users from the perspective of this person is going to like this color, which is an important piece of theory to understand. So I definitely think those are good venues to go start. But to have the UX process, you still need to find one of the very few resources that exist in the world that are going to be able to lay that out for you succinctly.
In sort of the same vein, because UX design is a new sort of role, like what kind of roles do you see, like what's the job market like? Do you see, like does every company have a UX designer? Do like certain types of companies have UX designers? Do they like do freelancers? Or what's sort of the job prospects?
The good news is that the job prospects are growing at a psychotic pace. UX is one of these terms that is blowing up. The problem that happens is that not everyone who's looking for a UX designer, or actually I would say that a large majority of people that are looking for a UX designer don't really know what they're looking for yet. They don't really know what that is because they don't necessarily understand it themselves yet. So you'll see job posts that are very mixed. You'll see job posts for UX designers that include requirements for being a coder. You'll see a lot of UX/UI. Sometimes they really are UX and UI designers that they're looking for. Sometimes they just call it UX/UI, but the actual job description really implies that it's just a UI job. it sort of depends on the market as well. Obviously, if you're in San Francisco, if you're in New York, if you're in LA, if you're in London, you're talking about a technical job market which is much more informed, is much more trendy or on the limit, or pushing the limit. So it tends to be a little more succinct. In outer reach markets like here in Berlin, it will still be a little bit more confused. So it sort of, you have to look at it very subjectively. You have to say, okay, this is what's being asked for. Does this fit what I define as UX designer or not?
Yeah.
And therefore, it's the right job for me. And do I want to be a UX specialist, or do I want to be, a mixed role person? There are such things as good UX and UI designers. There are even such things as unicorns, UX, UI, and graphic and developers. However, it's very, very hard to stay good at all three all the time. It's hard enough being an expert at one thing. Try being an expert at all three. It's really tough. So I really encourage people who are looking to do UX design, to learn that process, to adopt it, to stick to it, and really look for the opportunities to be real UX designers.
Yeah.
Are they sometimes harder to find? Do they sometimes take gently explaining to the potential employer what they're actually going to do for them? Yes, but it's your job as a UX designer to, again, start defining that more and more. If you can learn UI as well, if you can balance it with that, you'll definitely grow your job opportunities, because there's always going to be opportunities for either mixed roles or one or the other. Again, you have to be good at two things, and you have to stay good, and you have to stay up to date at those two things and be able to constantly sell yourself in that way, and that's tough. The first part of your question, just quickly, there's lots of freelance, there's lots of actual jobs.
Okay.
Freelance is going to be more on the startup end. The real solid long-term jobs is going to be more on the corporate end. Just depends on what you're looking for.
So Clay has a really interesting question. So he says, my goal is to become a UX designer for my current company. We're a CRM company. I currently work in marketing. He says, our application is weak in UX, UI. Do you have any advice on how to convince my employer that UX is important and is like a needed role at the company?
You're going to have to repeat the last part of the question again, just because you faded out.
Sorry, it's the most important part. So he says, do you have any advice on how to convince my employer that UX is important and like a needed role? I just chatted it to you as well.
Okay, see if I can find it. There we go. Okay, cool. Can you guys still hear me? Am I coming through sort of clear?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so yeah, it's an interesting question. Actually, something that a lot of our students come to us with. We even have people from like major German corporates and UK corporates, and even actually 2 US corporates, who are coming to us with this question because they realize, as marketers, or as designers, that UX is going to become very important perspective as the company becomes more digital. And when you're talking to your employer about it, there's some very practical things that you can point out, which is UX is the study of the user experience, of the user process, of that story. Your business goal of most companies is going to be very defined. It's going to be, this person has to sign up, or this person has to buy X, or this person has to be accountable, bring themselves into a role where they're accountable for XYZ over whatever period of time. And what UX's goal is to look at that process and refine it, make it easier, make it more natural, make it more interesting for that target user. So essentially what UX should be doing, particularly on an active product, is a very refined version of conversion optimization. That's really what you're going to be doing. So you're going to be taking whatever the business goals of that company are and breaking them down into, okay, the user has to go through this process to get there. How can we make that more enjoyable for them, more natural for them, more interesting for them? And specifically for that person, for that profile of users, how can we funnel them in? And if there's a subset of of user profiles what do they need, and can we bring them in through a different entrance, or is there a different storyline for them to get them to the same goal quicker, more efficiently, more happily? So that's the most basic one. For employers is, listen, this is like our way of seriously advancing our conversion optimization within our digital products. The second one, to be frank, a lot of employers, and this depends on your employer. I know we have 2 students that this worked for recently, which is why I bring it up. Otherwise, I wouldn't really think of it. Is a lot of employers are just looking to invest in whatever that next thing is. Some employers really do sort of say, okay, this is on the horizon. This is becoming, very important, particularly on the low level, on the startup level, on the building level. This is an opportunity for us as a big company to sort of jump the gun and be on the trendy end and really use techniques that help us grow in a way that small companies are doing, and sort of use that as leverage both internally to bring new staff and new interest in, but also externally. Maybe it's a PR story, maybe it's tra-la-la. Again, not something I would have thought of, except that that's exactly how 2 of our students sold it to their employers, who then proceeded to happily pay for them to take the course and are seeing the returns from it as we speak. So, again, it depends on, I can't answer the question too succinctly without knowing what kind of company it is, or what the actual goal is, but, conversion optimization being really the optimal answer, a really good perspective on that, a process for executing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's awesome advice. Okay, so I want to spend just a few minutes talking about Career Foundry's actual UX design program, just because we talked about like different ways to learn, and so I mean, we've got the source right here, so might as well get some of these questions answered as well. So does somebody need to have a certain background in order to succeed in the Career Foundry program? Y'all have been sort of, evolving over the last year. Have you seen sort of an ideal student in the UX program?
The ideal student is one who's really, it's someone, you have to do your research. You're not going to pay for a course unless it's something you really want to learn. And I mean, some people do, and that's fair. They want to try it out, or they're not really sure what they want, and they want to see if this is an experience for them. But do your research, see if this is something that you really want to do, see if the idealisms, the philosophy behind what UX design is, meets sort of your interests or not. Because ultimately what it comes down to, from a motivational perspective, from a learning perspective, and from an execution perspective, I mean the product that you build as your core piece of portfolio as you go through the course comes from the fact that you have to be interested, you have to be very dedicated to it. Like any learning, I suppose, like any career, I suppose. We have students of all levels. We have students who are total beginners. We have one student who was a history major in university, but really likes using mobile apps and technology, and couldn't, just looking at the span of, okay, regardless of my past, what interests me for the future, and looked at sort of the range of what she could learn to make an impact on the tech industry, to bring herself into it. UX design was a philosophy that fit for her, and she's a phenomenal student. There's, with no basics, no understanding previously of what it is, and she's doing great. We have other people who are longtime designers, guys who were in the ad world or print world for 10 plus years, who said, okay, technology is just way more fun to work on now. It's easier to get work for that, or it's more interesting, or it's the next development of whatever I've been doing. Now I'm going to go take this UX course and sort of add it as a toolkit or an extra tool set to my entire approach to design and offering as a designer, and then take that forward and make that one, big jump forward, so I can really build products, not just paint them, but build them. So in the end, does it really matter if you have experience? Do you need prerequisites? No. As I said, the best students are the ones that are really driven to the topic, to the philosophy. And if you're not sure how we define UX design, there's an article on our blog called "The Difference Between UX and UI Design," which is it was a very important piece for us because it makes some very strong claims about our opinion about UX design, but it also really articulates sort of the philosophy that we follow in the course. And what we teach in the course is really, more than anything, a process. A person or someone who can understand, evaluate. You know, you have to be open and honest with yourself. If dealing with people, we can give you the with its process, and you know what the execution points are beyond that to meet the end goal of your employer or your interest in your product or client, however your interaction is based. And that process is really the strongest takeaway. You know, in 3 months, you learn how to build products. You learn all the elements that are incorporated in UX design. And it's a first step towards kicking off that career. It's not necessarily definitive. You can't, if you have no previous experience in the tech field at all, no one's, it's going to be hard to walk into a high-level position after 3 months, regardless of your training. But we can certainly provide you with a very strong infrastructure and a great portfolio to kick off and go get those first, few small clients or even that internship or that junior level position to start building on that ideal and that career.
Awesome. Yeah, that's like a very realistic goals, I feel like. Christopher Lewis has a question. So he says, how easy or hard is it to complete your program while working a 9-to-5 job? And this was one of my questions as well.
The ultimate question. Yes, the ultimate question. Christopher, was it?
Christopher, yeah.
Christopher. There's no regular answer to this. Again, we have people who really struggle with it, like really a lot, but we also have people who fly through it anyway. The main thing is that you have to realize, with any learning process, with any course, it is a commitment. And it comes down to the situation of your personal life and your job, to be honest. If you are the type of person that is in a job that's draining, and you come home at 5 p.m. every day, burnt, and just like want to sit in front of the TV, and that's it, it's going to be really tough. It's going to be hard because you're talking about, 5 lessons a week around, if you're executing it kind of on the 3-month schedule, you can do it faster, you can do it slower, but if you're doing it on the 3-month sort of pace, 5 lessons a week that are between 2 and 4 hours, some of which are a little bit shorter, some of which are a little bit longer, and if you want to do a really great job, it's going to take more time. If you really want to experience the whole breadth of learning, get the most out of your mentor, who you get to meet with once a week and everything, and will answer your questions, sort of guide you through, via messages and reviews and whatever. All this interaction combined, it is a time commitment. So not to sound scary, but, we do have students who come into it thinking, 10 to 15 hours a week, no problem. If you're running a full-time job and you're coming home tired from it, it is a problem. It is a problem. And you either have to really commit your weekends to it or agree to a pace that's going to let you study, for 4 or 5, 6 months, which is fine. You can do that with our product, but you want to make sure that you can stay motivated. Whatever it is that you have to do to make sure that you can stay motivated and have the energy to do it, that's the most important step.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, just one last question. So you had mentioned mentors. So everyone is assigned a mentor. Can you tell us about sort of the mentor's role, how they're facilitating the learning process? Are they there to answer questions, or are they there to teach you the curriculum, or what's their sort of role?
Sure. So the curriculum is sort of, to some extent, self-taught. I mean, we built this curriculum very specifically so that you can go through it and follow a line of thought and understand the theory, but there's practical tasks every day. So for every lesson, there's 60 lessons in the whole course. Every lesson has a practical task at the end of the day. And among those 60 lessons, you get 4 mentor sessions a month. But that's just one point of interaction. So your mentor sessions are basically a weekly, if you're booking them regularly, a weekly Skype session with your mentor, which is, an hour or so to sort of hash through the details of what you have been doing, what you will be doing, and sort of how to cater and hone what you're doing down to a better portfolio piece and how to launch it, launch your career with it. But the other places where they interact is that you can ask questions within the course. and take notes within the course, which are all contextual. So you kind of select text, or you select a paragraph and sort of ask the question within that, so that the mentor can come back and see what you were looking at and sort of answer as directly as they can. But you can also, when you submit your tasks at the end of every lesson, you can submit them through to the mentor to be reviewed if you want. And they'll look at it and they'll send you back feedback and or help or answer to your questions, or say, hey, maybe before you move on, consider X, Y, Z, so that this is really honed for the next stage. And that's really their purpose. Their purpose is not there to teach you so much as literally mentor you, is to try and push you and motivate you and keep you accountable for learning and building something that allows you to take a step outside the end of the course towards actualizing what you've learned.
Awesome. Okay, so Emil, when does the next Career Foundry program start? Can you start at any time?
We start, so right now, there are options to sign in and start any time, but we've actually, starting next month, they will start every Monday, and they will have certain limitations in terms of space, because we grow with our mentor pool. So if and when people want to book, definitely encourage you, if you've decided you want to do this, to try and decide on your date now. Either let us know via email. You can reach out to Annie through the platform, who's our student advisor, or me personally at emil@careerfoundry.com. And we'll try and make sure that you're hooked up for that specific start date. But definitely, if this is something you want to do, and I don't just mean this in terms of buying a course. I don't care if you want to learn UX through us or somewhere else. Just if you decide you want to do it, do it. Don't spend too much time thinking about it and letting yourself doubt. Yeah. It's the same with all things. If you say, okay, I want to do this, but I want to think about it for a week, there's like an 80% chance you're not going to do it, because by the end of that week, you're going to be thinking of all the things that could go wrong. If it's something that you really want to do, that you're really genuinely interested in, throw yourself at it. And if it's with us, we're going to help you get the most out of our course as we possibly can. And with our mentor, with our career services internally, with Annie, our student advisor and community manager, as well as myself, we'll try and work with you as much as possible to help you reach that goal of becoming a UX designer.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Emil. And thanks to everyone who's joined us for this Course Report and Career Foundry webinar. Emil, we can't thank you enough for being here. And if you have any additional questions for Career Foundry, I'll send out all of their contact info after this. You can get in touch with Emil or with Annie, who is wildly helpful. And if you have any questions for Course Report, don't hesitate to reach out to me. We'll send out a recording of this webinar, so check your inboxes for that, and you can share it with any of your friends who may have missed the live webinar. And please visit coursereport.com, sign up for our email list, and you'll get all of our future updates on webinars and interviews, and you can tweet us and tell us what school or topic you'd like to see at the next webinar. So thanks so much for joining in. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks, Emil.
Thank you, guys. It was great to talk to you. Thanks for having me, Liz. And don't forget the discount, guys. It's available for free Course Report.
Thanks.
Okay.